Good morning, Thursday morning. Sorry, forgot what day it is. Date. No, it's Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. And somewhat overcast day here in Scotland. Nice to be out in it though, it's gorgeous. My wee waterfall. My favourite tree. So that tree is very Yang. The water is Yin, but the waterfall is Yang. Good morning, Cindy. Hope you're well. I was thinking about you walking round here this morning. That's hilarious. 2010. Good morning, Mags. Good morning, Louise. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well. Here's the waterfall. So there's a tree up there that's very Yang. The water is very Yin. The waterfall is very Yang. Right, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Morning, Willie. Thanks for your support, Willie. I'm going to phone you today, Willie Grant. Get a wee short little chat because I've got my kind of question in mind for you. Right, here we go. Rattling through the alphabet, we're on Y. And I thought Yin and Yang. Well, I never thought Yin and Yang. Mags Landland thought Yin and Yang. She sent me that and said Yin and Yang. Willie sent me yield and you're enough and all the rest of it. And yeah, they're all very important. So, Yin and Yang. Most of us are familiar, if not an old late 80s rave tattoo on somebody's arm. But, you know that round symbol with the S in the middle and the two dots. Morning, Anne. So, Yin and Yang, or as Carl Jung would put it, the annemus and the anime in the mind, the shadow, the dark and the light. So, starting off the basics in Taoism, Yin and Yang. I'm not going to spend too much talking about Yin and Yang, Taoism, but from a psychological perspective, I would much rather approach this subject from the annemus and the anime. But Yin and Yang, what is it? Well, in Taoist and Tao religions, philosophies, Eastern philosophy, they described the masculine and feminine attributes of the masculine and the masculine attributes of the feminine as a symbol. That symbol was a circle with an S in it, black on one side with a white dot, white on the other with a black dot. So they believed that everything had an energy and that you were either yin or yang, or if you've got an illness in your body, you were possessing too much yin or too much yang, etc., etc. So, small basic example of that. Small example of that would be, let me think, I just showed you back there, so like a tree, depending on what kind of tree it is, so an oak tree would be very yang, whereas a bamboo would be more yin because it's more flexible. Water is very yin, it's a very feminine principle, but when it came over the waterfall, it's very yang. And so like an egg, the shell of an egg is very yang, the yolk that's inside it is very yin, right? You get in the picture? So I don't need to babble on too much about that. So everything in life we can start to look at as being yin or yang, masculine or feminine. You know, living at the top of a mountain is very yang. Top of the mountain with the sun beating on it is extremely yang. The valley is feminine, yin. If there's no sun and it's in the shadows, it's very yin. So there can be yin with more flavours of masculinity, right? So within the nervous system, let's look at it from the nervous system. Inside our limbic brain, our nervous system, we have a parasympathetic and a sympathetic limbic system. Okay, sympathetic cortisol moving forward, driving, doing. Parasympathetic, rest and digest. So sympathetic limbic system's very full on. It's a very moving type energy, fight, flight or freeze. If it becomes too much, it becomes, you can become paralysed by it, but the merit of it being there was for our survival and for our benefit. So let's not look at the negatives of that just now, right? So our sympathetic limbic system is very yang, our parasympathetic limbic system is very yin, right? So rest and digest. So why for yoga? In yoga, you do a pose, very dynamic, that's very yang. You do shavasana, you lie on your back, it's very yin, right? Finding balance. There's nothing wrong with these two energies. What can become a challenge and what can then develop into illness is if you find yourself doing, becoming too, moving forward, too sympathetic, and lose the ability to become parasympathetic. So what I see a lot happening culturally is that people get tapped into their sympathetic limbic system, right? Do, and the only way they can have a sense, an illusion of parasympathetic shavasana type activities is through guzzling alcohol, wine, smoking marijuana, etc, etc, etc. So what you then do is you then deny your internal fountain of energy, and you rely on coffee in the morning to get you up and get you into your sympathetic limbic system, and then at night you rely on wine, marijuana, or drugs or whatever, you rely on cocaine at the weekend, very masculine, right? Heroin, very feminine, right? Alcohol can be both. Alcohol contains both masculine and feminine type energies, but that's by the by. Right, so how does that play out about finding balance? Well, finding balance, work-life balance, that's all the rage, isn't it? It's trendy to be talking about work-life balance and all that kind of stuff, right? So, do you know what I was thinking about? I'm going to start off with this, right? Because this is what I was thinking about as I approached this subject this morning, right? This is what I was thinking about. I follow a minister. Morning, Colin, how are you? Are you well? Good, are you going down the river? Perfect, I'll see you at 8 o'clock. That's my buddy Colin, look. Seen him at the other side of the river. Colin, give us a wave, Colin. Give us a wave, you're online. Nice to see you, buddy. Right, so I have a right little giggle to myself walking around here, don't I? Right, start off with this. I'm really, what I'm doing is I'm putting something that should be at the end of the conversation first. So I follow a minister, Bowles, right, an American minister, right, and I think she's absolutely fantastic. I really, really like her, right. I was introduced to her a number of years ago, right. Love what she says, and she put a post up yesterday, right, and the post was the toxic masculine. And I'm just going to share how I felt. I was like, wow, right, blood boiling. And when I say toxic masculine to yous that are listening, majority have kind of heard it. You get an understanding what is a toxic masculine. Well, it's that over-identification with a negative masculine energy that's kind of very chauvinistic and etc, 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 right? And very violent and very aggressive and all that kind of vibe, right? Great, magic. What I found really extraordinary about that is that, morning Lewis, seeing the river, what I found extraordinary about that is, who's talking about the toxic feminine? Right, where's there? I would have respected you more, right? We know about the toxic masculine, right? We know about it, right? But where I'm coming from with this is, I looked at it and my blood boiled a little bit. I didn't even read it. You know what? I'm going to tell you the truth. I saw the headline, toxic masculine. I was like that. You know what? I don't need to read any more about that. That's coming across as arrogant. I don't. But what it got me thinking about was the conversations that we're allowed to have and the conversations that we're not allowed to have. We're not allowed to talk about the toxic feminine. We're not allowed to speak about that dark, cali, destructive feminine energy. We're not allowed to speak about that, right? That's a taboo. Now, what's helpful is that we can approach these situations and start to have conversations about them. So I put that way forward because it's as I've been approaching this, that's been burning away at my head and I had to kind of unload it, right? But we'll come back to that. So, annemus and annemie, Carl Jung, to whom ironically I started really looking at in probably 2010, and why I said I was speaking about Cindy earlier on was, it was round about a time I spent a lot of time between 2009 and 2011 on the west coast of Canada, going back and forward, probably 3-4 times a year. And because I had family out there, and there was a really cheap flight out of Glasgow called Zoom. You could get to Canada for like 99 quid. So it made sense. And it was whilst I was in Canada that I got and learned about a plant medicine called ayahuasca. It was also in 2010 that I dropped into a lecture with Dr. Gabor Mate, and I was introduced to the work of Gabor Mate. That was in February 2010. And that was then brought me on a path to start to look at indigenous cultures around about working with plant medicine. And yes, I did experiment with that then. Can't deny it, because my girlfriend at the time has wrote a book, and she's actually wrote about it in the book, although my name's Hamish in it, not Ross. So can't really deny that I have, but I have. Right, so what that showed me was about the unconscious mind, right? And I started getting into Jung around about then. Now, I'm qualified in psychodynamic, and I went down the rabbit hole with Freud. But what was interesting, looking back at 2009, 2010, I was introduced to a well-established Jungian psychotherapist, and we went for lunch a few times, and had some excellent conversations. And what ignited my thirst for Jung back then was, he made a statement that you will never he, as a Jungian psychoanalytic psychotherapist, said, I could not understand Jung without first understanding Freud. So I was overly associated with Freudian psychoanalytic psychotherapy at that point, right? And it was around 2010 that I started indulging myself with Jungian, right? Why am I talking about that? So, Jung. The reason I'm saying this to you is I always encourage you to do your own research, okay? Do your own thinking into this. Do your own thinking into what it means. Now, that little symbol, the yin and yang, right, is far more complicated than a little circle with a black dot, black side with a white dot, and a white side with a black dot. It's absolutely fascinating when you start to study the yin and yang from a psychosocial, psychological perspective, right? It's phenomenal. So if you are, I would encourage you to look at that. And what I would encourage you to look at is not so much the yin and yang, because that becomes a bit flowery and a bit talking about energies. Whereas when you look at how Carl Jung describes it as the annemus and the anime of the mind, it's where we both contain masculine energy and feminine energy inside us. Now, from a male's perspective, I am masculine. I have sex organs which would be indicative that I am a male, right? Okay, but I also have a feminine side to me. Now, that feminine side inside me was developed by what? Well, it was developed by my conditioning, my social conditioning, right? So back in the 70s when I was brought up, my mother was a housewife. My mother gave up her job when she became pregnant, and she was a housewife, right? My father was absent, as men were back then. They didn't play a great role in the house, etc., etc. So then, my feminine side is an attribution of intergenerational hand-downs, if you like, hand-me-downs, from the architecture that I'm built up from, okay, which has been passed down through generations, right? So, if you become overly identified with the feminine aspect of yourself as a male, how will that present itself? Right, that presents itself in a male when a male becomes withdrawn, becomes moody, becomes non-motivated, and doesn't feel as if he's got any drive inside him. Now, what I'm going to encourage you to do here, right, is play a little game. Now, look at yourself, or start to people watch and look at those around you. When you see couples, you're sitting in the park, that's giving you an insight into what I do in my spare time, right? You're sitting in the park and you're looking, people watching. Now, Look at the man and look at the woman. Has the woman identified herself with a more untrue masculine or masculine type quality where she's the one that's dominant, she's the one that's making the decisions, she's the one that's kind of... I've got to rotate my phone, right? She's the one that's dominant, that's making the decisions, that's leading the family, right? And is he the one that's just going along with that? Now, these roles, these energies, if you like, these internal attributes of the soul, as Carl Jung would describe it, the seat of the soul, these change. And they interact very differently at different times, right? Now, for women, you've got feminine. What does feminine mean? Okay, today, unfortunately, feminine can mean large eyebrows, large eyelashes, tailored eyebrows, nice breasts, thin waists, right? Shellac nails, etc., etc., etc. Clothes and fashion. Now, if a woman, and this isn't as a whole, this isn't as a rule, right? This isn't constant. But if you've got a woman and you're working with a woman that's got the dyed peroxide blonde hair, the shellac nails, you know, the whole image of masculinity going on, right? It's a great disguise for where that untrue masculine is in their life, okay? And where they've had to fight men because somewhere back in their psychology, when they were a little girl, that was abused, okay? And there was hurt and there was pain. And that would maybe have happened by a man. That femininity would have been attacked by a role model or a carer from a masculine perspective. So then what that little girl does is that little girl pushes that down and hides it with fashion and fabric and clothes, right? And then projects it out and ends up in relationships with very toxic men that may violate them, abuse them, control them, possess them, etc., etc., etc. Now, why is this important? Why this is important is because if we're not having these adult conversations about this kind of stuff, the only way that we can know unconsciously to manage these internal conflicts of energy between masculine and feminine, yin and yang, annemus or anime, first thing, substance misuse, right? Now, what we've got going on collectively, you know, the bigger picture other than you and I, look at what's going on right now. And it was wonderful to see that through this pandemic, this COVID-19, the women politicians and leaders were getting phenomenal praise. Now, from a personal standpoint, I have believed for, goodness, a few decades now that the survival of our species, the survival of our human race is going to come through the feminine. It's going to come through women because something really needs to be burst. But before we can get to this new level of consciousness, shall we call it that, right? That's me using my hippie language, right? This new level of consciousness, what's happening right now collectively is this massive amount of rage, a massive amount of rage around women. Now, that feminine movement, in a lot of ways, is attacking the masculine, okay? They're attacking the masculine and they're making out that males are perpetrators, which we have been. Men have been perpetrators, right? That's fact. But the minute that you as a woman make the statement that a man is a perpetrator, you're also in the same hand setting up a victim-perpetrator dynamic, right? And that's not helpful, right? Really complicated, but how do we find balance? How do we find a new way forward? How do we find a new earth? And it's not going to come through the masculine, because those old masculine, dominant, capitalist, greedy, selfish structures that we've inhabited now for way too long is what's causing the demise of our system. And politically, if you look politically at what's happening, I think what's attempting to happen is find a common language between these masculine, feminine type roles. So, yin and yang, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker. Darth Vader had the potential to be good. Luke Skywalker had the potential to be brought over to the dark side. God, portrayed as love and joy and beauty, has the potential to be destructive and destroy. Yet the devil himself, the epitome of evil, was once a fallen angel, right? Taoism, yin and yang. Does it really matter what angle we're coming at this from? And I know that a lot of folk get put off by biblical studies and theology. But why is that? It's not because of the book. The knowledge that's in the book is equally as good as any knowledge which is in Taoism or Buddhism or any philosophies. It's the way that it's been manipulated and used to control society on a fear-based model, whereas if you don't do this, you will not go to heaven, you will not. As I said, Christ wasn't a Christian, right? He was just a really cool guy with dirty feet. It was the business model of our churches which have took the book and sold it as a religion and tried to fit that into a capitalist system so that they can then get the tithings from people so that they can go out and do other work within the community. Let's not do that in the guise of religion, right? Let's look at the word of Christ. Let's look at the word of Taoism and Buddhism and early forms of philosophy that's really, it's all about energy. God has the potential to destroy. The devil, who was a fallen angel, had the potential for love. The devil, okay, the dark side of the yin and yang sign, has got a little bit of light in him. God, that's represented as light, has got a little bit of dark in him. That's the way it is. But until we start to have adult conversations about our own shadows and our own darkness, right? We're living in a very, very dangerous structure. People that do not want to talk and have conversations about toxic femininity, right? Okay, why not? People that don't want to talk about their rage, their anger. Now, that rage and anger lives within us all. We all have a shadow. But what we do is we deny that shadow and we present to the world this image of what we think we are subjectively, right? Because, it wouldn't be nice, but I'm quite willing to have conversations with people around about my shadow. But those that are in authority, right? People locally within my community, when you find out that they have gossiped about you, right? Does that breed trust where you feel it's okay to talk about those dark aspects of yourself? No, it doesn't, right? So where do you have those conversations? Well, you can only have those conversations with Indigenous people that have been doing this for thousands of years, right? Where it's a safe space for you. Because without trust, you're never ever going to be able to delve into the darkness, right? And pull it out and bring it to the light. So, friends, guys, everybody that's took the time to listen to this morning, what I'm asking you to do is look around you. Look at what's coming up to the surface. Look at the collective unconscious. Take yourself out of our own little narcissistic thinking momentarily and look at the world. Look at what's going on, right? I'm a man. Men have raped, pillaged, stole, destroyed, been slave traders. Men have been slave traders. So see, when I saw that statue getting pulled down the other night there, I felt guilty for being a man, right? And when I hear about men and men have raped women, I'm a man. I feel guilty about being a man, right? And then when a woman does this, when a woman takes somebody's child and doesn't let the father see it, as a woman who's married with 2 kids, how do you feel? Women, how do you feel about that? How do you feel? Do you feel guilty? So then what's happening? We're all just caught up in a system of guilt and nobody's getting through it. There's no any conclusion. We're just stuck. But what's starting to happen, if you can look at this from a kind of metaphysical perspective for a moment, right, and I'll go off my wee kind of hippie tangent into talking about energy. Consciousness in our planet has to change. Agreed. We cannot keep going on the way that we've been going on. And that starts with conversations, honest conversations with ourselves, right? And that's about bringing the shadows to the light. Because until we bring the shadows to the light, it's always going to be happening out there. It's always going to be that policeman's fault that did that to George Floyd, or he's this or he's that, right? I'm going to have a conversation with somebody once this lockdown's over and I can actually sit close enough to them, because it's not going to happen, right? They're somebody that likes to consistently air their views politically about Trump, right? They are in a position of power and authority, and I have wholehearted evidence that they have discussed something that I spoke to them about confidentially, him and his wife, at a party, right? I'm done with that, because, and do I love the person? Yes. Do I have compassion for the person? Yes. Have I forgiven the person? Yes. But what I'm going to do is I'm not going to get into the untrue masculine and be angry. I'm going to show them their shadow. This is your shadow aspect. You are not safe, right? We need more people in our society that are safe, because until we have safety, we can't deal with our own shadow and deal with our own demons. So, I could babble on about Ying and the annemus and the anime and all of that kind of vibe forever and ever, right? But it's keeping it to half an hour. So, I would always encourage you to do your own research, right? Do your own homework. Are you a guy that's jumping about raging, that's been violent towards your wife and children? Cool, right? That's not very helpful, right? Look at what you're installing in people. Are you a guy that's overly identified with that feminine inside you? You've lost all motivation, all direction, you're listless, you're withdrawn, right? You feel like you don't have any energy whatsoever, okay? What you're dealing with is your own internal, but it's an imbalance within the relationship, because we're in an invisible relationship with our partner where their energy may be overly dominating and it's suppressing us. Now, that's not their fault, because they don't actually know they're doing it either, right? So it's about, how do we bring the scales, the balance back? How do we, if I'm a tomboy girl, right? How, if I'm a tomboy girl, do I bring some femininity, some feminine quality back into my life so that I can attract a man? Why would I attract a man when unconsciously I'm a man-hater and I'm projecting this independent woman that's a feminist that wears jeans more than she ever wears a skirt, right? Because that little girl that may have been inside her was violated, right? There are professionals. There are people that are willing to help you work through this stuff. But the first step's always the hardest. I would encourage you to do your own research. I would encourage you to start thinking. We all could do with more metacognition and start thinking about how we're thinking. And I hope that's helpful. Thanks, Mags, for bringing yin and yang to it, which annemus and anime, and bringing some balance into our life. And really, look at what's going on round about us, right? Our world feels as if, does it, just before I go, is it just me, or are any of you driving about thinking, the shit's just about to hit the fan? Something's about ready to happen. Something's about ready to implode. Well, what that is, if you are feeling that, right, and you're aligned with me saying that, there's an unconscious energy going on in the collective unconscious, which is full of rage, right? Now, that, if it goes unspoken about and remains unhinged, it's very dangerous. But before a seed can germinate, it's got to smash its way through the shell, that masculine. So what's inside the seed is very feminine. That little green structure with the leaves that pop out, it's very soft and angelic. But before it's penetrated the masculine shell of the seed to come through, it's had to have an explosion. Now, let's just imagine that that could be what's going on for us collectively before we take a transition into a new way of being, into a new sort of energy, into a new kind of consciousness. Not better, not worse, not a higher level of consciousness, just a level of consciousness. But before we get there, we've got to birth it. We've got to blast our way through the shell. Think about the germination of a seed. Very feminine little quality inside that. Very feminine little tiny green structure. But it's got to explode through the shell, which is very masculine. We've lived in a very masculine society. We've lived in a very male-dominated society for such a long time. Of course, women are going to be angry at us, right? But is that anger is used for destruction like Kali, it's not helpful. But if it's used as an energy for growth so that the wisdom of women can come through and really pioneer our planet into a new way of being, is that not a cool thing? Right, anyway, that was some just rambling thoughts. I disappear when I'm talking about this kind of vibe, right? I just don't even know where I go. Anyway, bringing myself back, ground myself into the present moment, Ross. I wish you all a fantastic day. Thank you to Mags Langland for suggesting Ying and Yang. Thanks to Willie Grant for his support over the last week. And thanks to everybody, really, because everybody's really cool. We're all in this stuff together. And the dangerous people are those that are not talking about it. So let's open up conversations and let's start speaking about these really hidden, dark parts of ourselves that terrify us. Because see, when you open the door to them and you let them out, they're actually not that bad. Take it from me, they're not that bad. You know, I was possessed by my anger and I started in September last year, really diving in and doing a set of practices which has been life-changing with regards to bringing all of that stuff which was unconscious into the consciousness. And we can start to show up. See when you do it. See when you start to work with those kind of energies, if you like, and bringing what's unconscious to the conscious. You just show up. You just be yourself. It's cool. You don't need to act different or in any other way, and you're all right with that. So it's quite a nice thing. So have a fantastic day, everybody. I wish you all the very best. I really do. Have a fantastic day. Z for Zebedee tomorrow. We're going on Magic Roundabout. Can't believe we've got through the alphabet. It's been awesome. It's been a great journey, hasn't it? Loved it. Appreciate everybody. Have a great day. God bless.